you go. How we get down, down. Here I come, Daisy.
Welcome to the Empowr podcast. We're here with La'Shawn Allen-Muhammed.
Yes.
Correct?
That's
yes. So, and we're right now at the Brownsville Culinary Center.
Yes, for those who are interested in culinary arts and looking to be certified to either own their own business or work in the field.
So there are a lot of new initiatives coming out into Brownsville so people can start their business. So today, we definitely want to talk more about business, bringing businesses to Brownsville. And La'Shawn has a lot of experience. So La'Shawn, you are the executive director of the Central Brooklyn Economic Development Corporation. You also are the director of the Long Island African American Chamber of Commerce.
That's correct.
And you're also the president of Entrepreneurs of New York.
Yes.
Yes, so you're doing a lot of things. You're running a lot.
It's all about entrepreneurship.
That's great.
And helping our community develop and just do for self, and become business owners. So everything is interrelated.
Perfect. So I know some of the topics I definitely wanted to cover are about gentrification, workforce, job development, growth in the areas of Brownsville. But I just wanted to give you a chance to start off by talking about the Central Brooklyn Economic Development Corporation, kind of what you guys offer,
Yes.
and also how you got to where you are
Yes.
in the organization.
Well, first I want to start out by saying that I was born and raised in Brownsville. So I grew up in Tilden Projects, which is not far from the culinary school on Dumont Avenue. And so this was a space that, we often came as youth, to shop. So this was, we would come to Belmont Avenue or Pickens Avenue, that this was something a place where we would come and frequent, but as consumers, right? And so, having lived here all my life, this place is always going to be home for me, although I no longer live here, but now I'm running a nonprofit organization, it's come full circle. And so I'm just here to do my part. To help to move the community forward, because it's an amazing place, and you don't always hear in the news or in the media positive things about Brownsville. So I like to think that myself and others who are also from the community and still doing work here are that positive side of Brownsville. We represent the positive side of Brownsville. Central Brooklyn Economic Development Corporation is a 30-year nonprofit organization that was started by community activists, community advocates, just like myself, in 1989, pretty much as to do what we're doing now, try to create a space or a vehicle for local residents to obtain careers, to get, probably back then it was probably a better job, start small business ownership, things of that nature. And back then they had a credit union, they ran a 9-week business course, they had education programs, and they had they were known as an employment center, right? And so over time, as many nonprofit organizations sort of come and go, or have experienced changes in administration, as well as political connections and funding. Over time, the agency began to offer more so education and social service type programming and veered completely away from business development. And so when I came into the organization about 4 years ago, there was a GED program, which we still have, and then we actually just lost a contract. So literally there was one contract to run an entire agency with a GED program. And so immediately, my job was to reorganize the board, because the board of directors, let me go back a little bit. So I came into the organization because of...
So where were you before?
So I also work for the New York City Health and Hospitals Corporation. I do this part-time.
Oh, okay.
So I do this part-time because, again, and to the point about what I inherited, one contract does not support a full-time executive director, staff, and operations. That just doesn't, it just doesn't add up. So prior to me coming into the agency, I had been working for the New York City Health and Hospitals Corporation as a director of training in workforce development. So I'm going to my 23rd year there, and one of the main jobs that I had most recently was running a nursing career ladder program. So it's essentially the same type of moving people out of from one state to the other, right, out of poverty. And so under Mayor Bloomberg's administration, the Center for Economic Opportunity was created and essentially funded 40 city agencies to run anti-poverty programs. So what my job was, we had a nursing school, 2 nursing schools actually. And so what my job was to identify low-income city residents throughout the 5 boroughs, and then see who qualified to become, a nursing student, and then help them, support them with scholarships through the program, and then hire them to work as nurses in our institution. And so that program I ran for about 7 years and graduated over 300 people.
Oh, that's great.
That was, and when I tell you that was a life-changing, and that's just one industry, right? But that was life-changing for many people. We had one young lady who was in the shelter. She received her bachelor's degree in nursing, and starting pay was about $70,000. And we're talking about, 8-9 years ago, right? And so most of the people who are in that program have just flourished. They were able to graduate without debt, student debt, right?
That's huge.
And a decent starting pay. And so again, that's economic mobility, right? That's economic development, where you can actually help someone get a leg up without having to look back, right? They don't have to look back and owe anyone money. They can just keep moving forward, and that's what happened. So I bring that experience to the organization, and that's what I look to do, not in just healthcare, but in other industries, and also on the business landscape. And so that's, so now fast forward, I'm at Central Brooklyn Economic Development Corporation, and we had the opportunity to write a proposal for an after-school program, right? So remember, there was one contract at the time, and so myself and a colleague wrote a proposal to start an after-school program focused solely on entrepreneurship. So this is funded by the Department of Youth and Community Development, and it's called Schools Out in New York City. So we created a program the acronym is SONIC, so it's Sonic Biz. And it's literally, we are the only solely focused entrepreneurship program funded by this entity in the city. And it's for middle school students. And so, it's essentially what we're looking to do is start at the middle school level, plant the seed, but also connect the students with local business owners, right? So that way they're learning in real time. They get to interact with folks who are literally either already in business or starting up a business, so they truly understand what it is to start up.
And you have to be immersed in these things. So I think,
Absolutely.
and it's interesting that you chose middle school age and that you said planting the seed early, because that's so important. There's a lot of programs out there geared towards opportunity youth who are 16 to 24.
Yes.
There's a lot of programs, but it's very, very hard to reach 16-year-olds, 18-year-olds. I was one of those kids. I didn't want to listen, and it's challenging. But getting young people earlier on and starting to have that idea grow naturally is super, super important. And even something as early as elementary school, to plant very rudimentary ideas to help them grow naturally, and then putting people who are doing these things around these young people, because we're always we're always learning, no matter how old we get.
That's right.
But when you're young, you're absorbing everything around.
You are a sponge, yeah.
Exactly. So whether it's something positive or negative that you're around, you're absorbing it. So it's very, very important that, especially what you guys are doing, having them around business people, because people of color, we're very, very resourceful.
Absolutely.
We're business people. We go out and get it.
Yes.
I was just talking about the churro lady in the subway. She's out there getting it. She's using what she has to propel herself further.
That's right.
So we have to make sure that we, uplift these internal forces that we have, these intrinsic motivations,
Yes.
and get the most out of our young people, give them more opportunities.
Right. And on that note, what's really important, because we have an innate hustle, absolutely, right? We are, because we had no other choice but survive. But now we want to make sure that we are not only planting seeds, but that we are providing them with the knowledge and the education to take it to the next level, right? Because most of us have not been formally trained as business owners, especially how to do business in this country. So that's one of the things that we are focusing on, making sure that they have not only do we spark that innate ability that we have, but also add the formal training. That's imperative. And so we want to make sure that we bring that into the program and the other programs that I'll speak about later.
Okay, great. So And I know I said that you're involved in a lot of things. One of the things I wanted to touch on was the Chamber of Commerce, the Long Island African American Chamber of Commerce. So for people who don't know, what is the Chamber of Commerce and why is it important to a small business owner?
Right. So a Chamber of Commerce, essentially, just as an infrastructure, is an institution that helps to advocate and to support building capacity for local businesses. That essentially is how a chamber works. They can, not technically lobby because that has to be in your bylaws, but pretty much build relationships with institutions, with elected officials to help businesses move forward. That essentially is how a chamber works. And it's a membership, right? It creates a space for folks to come together, to network, to build off of each other, to actually influence cooperative economics. That's another important function of the chamber. And so what's important about the Long Island African American Chamber of Commerce, well, first off, most people do not realize that Long Island, Brooklyn, and Queens is essentially one space. It's not separate.
Whoa. I always call Long Island fake New York, and I was playing.
No, but most people do not. It's a funny story. When in my inauguration in 2015, we held it at Borough Hall, Brooklyn Borough Hall. And when they looked at because whenever you ask to use the space, you have to fill out an application. And so they asked me, it's like it wasn't organic that the connection was made, Long Island and Brooklyn, And so I sort of had to have a conversation about that, right? And honestly, I think that's a connection that people still have some trouble with. But essentially, so there's that regional thing I wanted to clarify. And so what's important, though, about the Long Island African American Chamber of Commerce is we are the only black chamber for New York State or downstate, I would say. You have the Greater Harlem Chamber of Commerce, which is a black chamber, but they're focused on Harlem. There isn't a black chamber for the entire New York City and honestly downstate, like upstate region. You'll have, I think there's one in Buffalo, if I'm not mistaken. So we are the only one. And so that's why it's really significant. And so it's still a young chamber, still growing, still developing. And so it's great this is my favorite space to be, in this startup, in this blank slate space where it's like the sky's the limit, right? That you do what you know needs to be done, but also have the flexibility to grow and learn.
And especially with our new generation of just young people coming up, entrepreneurship is going to be huge. I don't want to say it's a new wave because entrepreneurship has been happening since the dawn of time, but yeah.
But you're right, this is different.
Yeah, because people want flexibility, especially with the internet and being able to see that you don't have to be held by the standards of corporations or anything else. You can make it on your own.
That's right.
So yeah, and being part of like the chambers of commerce, being part of these networking organizations, it's huge because it connects you with other people and you're able to learn from these people and also leverage relationships and also provide value.
That's right.
So that's one of the, and I know a little bit about the chamber, but not that much. I definitely need to be.
You have to join.
I should. So what is it like to join?
So it's essentially filling out an application, just like any other membership organization. There are monthly meetings. There are special events. It's a typical membership organization. So it doesn't take much to join. It can be done online, really simple. And so I'll send you the information.
Okay, good. I can always post it down in the description section so people could be able to get on that as well. So you're involved in a lot of local politics and you know what's happening in the neighborhood. What are some initiatives that are being passed to help small businesses grow?
So, well, let me start with the current initiative called the Brownsville Plan. This neighborhood essentially over the past 10 to 15 years has been involved in many plans. Not necessarily anything actionable came out of the plans, a lot of research happening, but this is a little bit different. And so what the Brownsville Plan is connected through the HPD, and it's essentially what it is, the HPD, I believe, they own 7 vacant lots in the district. And so this is Community District 16, for those who may not be familiar. So in Brownsville, right, it's Community District 16, and so there are 7 vacant lots. And so what the Brownsville Plan did was, through a year-long process, engage the community residents to ask, what would you like to see in your community, right? So everyone, housing is high need in the community. We have a ton of shelters in the community. Housing is a huge need. Also, I would, on the housing note, I also want to note that this in Brownsville is the highest concentration of public housing in the country. There's no other space in the United States that has a concentrated number of housing developments than in Brownsville. So that's also significant. And so, and you have some families who may not want to, and what housing was supposed to do is pretty much be a segue, right? Yeah. So temporary housing, low cost until you're ready to move on to that next step. But we know the story, we know what happened, right? But we do have some housing, some residents who live in NYCHA. That's the acronym. I'm going to try really hard not to speak in acronyms.
What, NYCHA? If y'all don't know NYCHA by now, no fun.
No, but it's true. But I think we take for granted that people know when we're in the industry that people know what we're talking about, and it's so annoying. It's just like you're walking around, you're walking acronym. It's like no, like what is the name of?
So HPD is Housing Development.
Housing Preservation Development. Housing and Preservation Development.
Oh man, y'all caught me.
Right. And see, that's the thing, and I'm saying HPD, and I didn't even realize. This is the thing. I just want us to be more conscious when we're having conversations with people, especially in spaces like on shows like Empowr, right? So that way, because everyone may not know. So, and part of our job is to educate. Right.
Yes, exactly. So New York City Housing Authority is NYCHA, so it's just public housing that's ran by the city. But funded by the federal government. So that is significant as well. But so the reason why I brought housing up is that NYCHA up is because we may have some residents who are looking to move out and into the next phase of whatever housing looks like for them. So whether it be home ownership, into another apartment, so on and so forth. So with the Brownsville plan, it's there's an investment from the city of $1.4 billion into developing housing and commercial spaces in Brownsville, right? And so that's, I believe, 4 of the vacant lots are being developed under this initiative. And so throughout the year, different events were held throughout the community so that the city understood exactly what residents wanted to see built in their community. And so there are themes connected to each lot. So one theme is health and wellness. So there's going to be a new supermarket, I believe, and then some affordable housing. But now don't quote me on this, but from what I understand, the housing developments that are being developed on that lot, this is on Livonia Avenue, will be rent to own, if I'm not mistaken. This is so. I actually want to. Huge. I want to. It's huge, because we haven't had any type of home ownership on a large scale opportunity since the Nehemiah development back in the 80s when I was in middle school. And not to say how old I am, but that was a little while ago, right? So what happened with the Nehemiah developments? How did that pan out?
It's amazing. They're literally, I don't know if any have ever foreclosed, because they were able to purchase those homes for about maybe less than $50,000 or something like that. So these are all single family homes, but they were, that was one of the most successful home ownership developments that we've seen in decades. And there hasn't been another one since.
And it's crazy because honestly, and for people who don't know, the rent to own is essentially you're signing a contract and your rent goes towards home ownership. Right, that's right. So you're not paying a mortgage, you're not taking out a loan, it's just you're paying the quote-unquote landlord, whoever owns the building, yes, rents, and then eventually you own your property.
Right. So that is what the community. So what's also unique about this is there's a part of this, how it was written, the plan, is that for every development, a local community-based organization would be part of that development, right? And so I received that information from a local nonprofit. So again, I want to make sure that I confirm that is the case, but if it is, it's amazing. Right. So the other lot, so that's one lot. The other lot on Rockaway Avenue is for culture. And so that is, so culture, things related to there's going to be I think Brick Arts is going to be there. Pure Elements, that's the local CBO, so that's a new dance studio.
Oh, that's nice.
So a space where people can just, come and watch shows and things like that, because our cultural institution right now is the Brownsville Heritage House, which has been here for about 35 years, but they are housed in a small space in a library on the corner of Mother Gaston, and Dumont. And funny enough, Mother Gaston used to be Stone Avenue when I was growing up, but it was actually named after Mother Rosetta Gaston, who's the founder of the Heritage House. So they wound up, so that was, part of the paying homage to her and the work that she did in the community. So the institution, it was open, I believe, in 1985, and I believe she passed away a month before the doors opened. Yeah, and but thankfully the work continues. It's an amazing space. You should visit. You should absolutely visit there if you get a chance. It's awesome, and they have amazing people running it. And Patricia Deans, who I have to make sure I mention, she ran as the executive director. She ran that organization for many years before she passed away. Miriam Robinson is the current ED, but they've continued to hold her legacy, Mother Gaston's legacy, up, and so that's amazing. And so that's a small cultural institution, but we need more. Yeah. Right? And so that space on Livonia Avenue would be that. And then the third is, or the fourth, I'm sorry, because I believe there's 2 lots on Livonia Avenue. So then the 4th lot is on Glenmore and Christopher, which will be called the Beeville Hub, right? So that's the business hub that will become the business center for Brownsville, and so that's the one that we are connected with, working with Brisa Builders, a minority woman-owned development firm. Erica Keller is a developer, and so we're really excited about that. So that's, again, affordable housing on top, commercial space on the bottom. So we'll be there we're bringing in a credit union into the community. There'll be a restaurant and also a spa.
A spa? Oh, yes, I know where I'm coming now. No, fine.
Yeah. And what's so amazing about that, and so the spa, one of the owners or co-owners is a resident of Brownsville.
Oh, that's important.
So that's really what we want to make sure that we're, pushing, to make sure that the businesses that are coming in, the new businesses that are being developed by the people who live here.
So that's perfect, because I also wanted to ask, so how can middle-class people and or people who have a low income start investing in their community to find a return on the investment and get a return on the gentrification of a neighborhood?
Right.
Because usually we get exposed, they have all these initiatives, then people with money come in, take advantage, and push us out.
That's absolutely, so I love that you asked that question, right? And so whenever I have a conversation around gentrification and what it means by definition, right, is literally moving a community, income level, moving from low into the middle class, right? Like, that's by definition. So that's what we want, but for the people who live here. So there isn't anything that says it has to be new people, right? You can gentrify your own neighborhood, right? And so that's what we're looking to do. It is not our goal, and I don't think anyone from Brownsville will say, oh no, we want to remain having a percentage of our residents in poverty. We want to remain low income. I don't believe that anybody would say that, right?
Yeah, the rising tide lifts all boats.
Exactly. So what we have to do is, make sure that we are building the vehicles and creating those pathways for this to become a reality. So that's why this work and us becoming the Beeville Hub is so important. But we have to do this work very early. Not when the building opens its doors. We have to start doing that work now. So we've been doing the work, slowly but surely. But again, in the workshop that you attended a couple of weeks ago, that was pretty much one of the goals, is to make sure that folks from the community who want to start a business or a nonprofit organization, and as we taught that day, you should probably do both, is that we want to make sure that these commercial spaces that are being developed, that it's the folks that we're helping to build their capacity to become the owners of the space. And I say that emphatically, not the leaseholders, owners of these spaces. We have to start owning the spaces in this community. That's how you create wealth, and that's how you promote cooperative economics. Because most of the businesses that are on this corridor, Belmont Avenue and Pickens Avenue, all of the spaces are owned by other people, and all of the people, for the most part, who operate those businesses are not from this community as well. So where are the resources going, right? We buy all the time, but the profits leave the neighborhood. Yeah. We have to stop. We have to put a stop to it. So that's essentially the work that Central Brooklyn Economic Development Corporation will be focused on over the next 5 to 10 years, honestly, because we have to. So we're starting with middle school, planting the seeds, but also working with community-based organizations to make sure that they have the resources that they need and are well educated to be able to start and or grow their current business or organization.
So we talked a little bit about gentrification and trying to stay ahead of gentrification. So I guess what are some of the causes of gentrification?
Well, I mean, some of the causes of gentrification is essentially what you said earlier about, these investments that are made into communities, pretty much impoverished communities, to redevelop, but without a plan or a strategy to make sure that that return on investment trickles down. That's the problem, right? So we have to make sure that that formula, that there's a space in there for some of that investment to remain in the community, and as you said earlier, create spaces for the community to invest themselves, right? So the root of that is pretty much how these deals are structured. That is the cause of it. That's the root, because if the deal is structured in a way in which would be beneficial for the community, by meaning that they would profit from it, then we wouldn't really see the outcomes that we've been seeing.
So what happens in situations, I'm not sure you have the answer, where it went wrong, but situations like Harlem, where Harlem was like the black mecca of America, and then Harlem's gentrified,
Right.
at least the west side.
Right.
And it's getting more and more gentrified as Columbia buys up property and
Yes.
all these different things happen. And then even like the Bed-Stuy, gentrification, full force, Bushwick, all these areas. Where did they go wrong in making sure that their people got ahead of the curve and were able to profit off of gentrification?
I really don't know. I can't answer for what happened, and it was probably different reasons, honestly. I don't think it was just one reason in what happened in Harlem and what happened in Bed-Stuy, even though it's a similar outcome. But what I can say, though, is just seeing what has happened, it just really seems that there weren't strategies built in from within the community, like from the elected officials and from the planned community boards, a mechanism to make sure that those entities. So let me give an example. So with the investments that are coming in from the Brownsville plan, and then there's also Vital Brooklyn. That's the state investment. That's another pretty much, I think, $1.4 billion. So there's over $2 billion being invested in Brownsville right now, right? And with those investments, there's 6,600 apartments being developed. What we need to make sure, and what we will make sure happens, is that we work with other organizations to make sure that we prepare the community to be able to become those residents. Because that's what typically happens. It's a lottery, and any and everybody can, apply, but you have to meet the criteria to move into these entities, so that we know in advance what the criteria is. Then number one, we need to lobby to make sure that there's a high percentage of those apartments are mandated for local people. So given the first right of refusal, they can at least, allow that to happen, right? But then also making sure that we're doing the work on the ground to prepare people to make sure that we're hosting financial literacy classes, that we're helping people build their credit. So that way, anybody, if someone was coming in from the Upper West Side or coming from Brownsville, it would still, the application, you wouldn't really know the difference. And so what also comes in with that is the workforce development component. We need to make sure that we are connecting local residents with the decent jobs or careers that are available in this community, right? So now incomes have increased, credit is better, so that's the work that needs to be done on the ground. And I don't think that happened in those other communities,
I agree. So on an individual level, people, they need to make sure that they're financially savvy. So attending workshops. There's a lot of free workshops within the community.
Yes.
You have to just go on like an Eventbrite, join Facebook groups, join the things that you feel are geared towards where you want to go. So I think it's a big step, like you were saying. Workforce development, making sure that you're getting into these good high-paying jobs, and making sure that your family members who are starting off in their careers know what these high-paying jobs are and where the trends are going. So that being said, where do you see the job market going, especially here in Brownsville? Like, what are going to be the high-paying jobs?
Well, so as part of this Vital Brooklyn initiative, that is not only housing developments, but also the healthcare institutions are also expanding, right? So with the expansion of our local healthcare institutions, that means that should mean that there's an expansion of jobs. So knowing what development is happening on that level, then it's our job to find out what those jobs are going to be. So either the folks who already work in those institutions are moving up, creating a pipeline for the jobs they leave behind, or understanding what those new jobs will be and making sure that we are creating the spaces for training and education so that they can qualify. So again, it's understanding what the new jobs and emerging jobs are going to be, and then making sure that we're helping people meet the criteria and not wait until after the fact, because that again is part of if we have a strategic plan around how to develop and prepare community residents, then we won't have the same outcomes that we had in Harlem and in Bedford-Stuyvesant, right? And so, as an example, and this is one of the projects that we're actually working on. We are part of a Robin Hood Foundation Economic Mobility Labs planning grant. Right, we are one of 4 organizations. It's Central Brooklyn EDC, Brownsville Community Justice Center, Made in Brownsville, and the Community Board. So we are working as lead partners to work with other organizations to, again, just do sort of like this planning work, right, and just come up with a strategy on how to help the community move forward. So part of Central Brooklyn's role in this is to identify these job vacancies and to work with the large employers. So in this community, we have a hospital, we have a large healthcare clinic, we have schools, we have nonprofit organizations. So even if we just start there and looking at the current vacancies and what the emerging jobs will be, like starting there, right? But then also looking around the city to see what the emerging jobs are going to be, and just making sure that we prepare the community. So that's one part. The other part is the entrepreneurship that we spoke about earlier. We cannot ignore that is a fast-growing industry. Entrepreneurship, being a business owner so that you can become an employer. So we're also creating employers as well, right? So it's like two-tiered approach to this.
Okay, so what businesses do you feel are going to be booming once a lot of these projects start getting they're off the ground, but as far as start popping up and people start having access to them?
I would say, healthcare is there's always a need, and unfortunately, because Brownsville isn't the healthiest of neighborhoods, so there's high instances of asthma and heart issues and high blood pressure and things like that. So there's always going to be a need for healthcare workers. So that's one industry. Tech is also a growing industry, right? And education, right? So I would say those are the 3 areas that have always been, but I think more so on an emergent side is, I would say, technology, cybersecurity, things like that. And so again, it's our job to find out where those industries and opportunities are, and that's exactly what we plan to do.
Yeah, great. So I know we're speaking a little bit about workforce development and different trends, like you said technology, and you said education. So it seems like education is really moving, I don't say it's moving away from college, but I think a lot more people are becoming aware that college isn't for everyone, and that it's a big investment that people are jumping into and coming out with a bad return on investment.
Well, so one of colleges, I think, were aware some years ago, about that issue, right? And so they've created these arms of the institution called continuing education, where you can get your certification and not necessarily a college degree, but a skill, right? The other thing I want to mention is that the other project that we're working on as part of is funded by Robin Hood Foundation and XQ, and that's to create a new high school in the community. And this particular, going back to the developer that I mentioned earlier, Brisa Builders, so we're working so the developer put together a proposal to create a new high school around the trades, right? And so the school, if funded, we will open a new school in September 2021 called Our Space, and it's the School of Property Management. I have to look at the acronym. So it's property management, real estate, development, construction, engineering, and engineering for the environment. So this is literally, and those students, when they graduate, we will incorporate the model. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Bard High School. I think Medgar Evers has one where high school graduates get a diploma but also an associate's degree.
Oh, so who's? I think I did hear about it, which
Yeah.
I was like, that's awesome. The amount of stuff we learned in high school, they repeat it in college.
Right.
Just give me the associate's degree. I made it through high school. Give me something more, you know?
Right. And you know, and more importantly, some real skills, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, these are young people who are going to be, you know, in this school, you know, hopefully, you know, we'll get to develop it, you know, we'll be working with industry professionals throughout. So they'll be, you know, exposed to the industry. They'll be in internships and mentored by professionals of color who are pretty much the minority in a lot of spaces in New York City. So hopefully this is another strategy to create and to expand the number of, you know, black and brown real estate professionals and future developers so that they can start building their own cities and rebuilding communities. That's the goal.
It's beautiful. Okay, I guess we could just start wrapping up with some final questions. What do you believe is the first factor we need to address in fighting poverty?
Education.
So education is number one?
Education is number one. If we were educated, if our educational institutions prepared us to think freely and not be industry workers and the labor force, right? So essentially out of slavery, right? So that, you know, over the past 400 and so some odd years, this country was built off of the backs of slaves, right? Free labor. Skilled folks who were from the continent that some called Africa, right, came and built this country. After the so-called emancipation, right, these same skilled folks created and built their own communities and then entered Jim Crow laws and things like that. So that essentially, given the space and proper education to be who we naturally are and to gain those skill sets, were taken away with public education, right? Like when you look at the average school in our communities, they are not preparing our young people to be their own bosses. They're not preparing our young people to gain those skill sets a lot of time. And this is what's interesting, going back to the nursing program I talked about. Most of the people, you would hear some comments about how, you know, folks from other countries came in and took all the nursing jobs, right? That actually really wasn't the total story. When we tried to help people become nursing students, most of them couldn't do the math. So those fundamental skills that were necessary to get into the nursing skills were not there. So what we did though is we created preparation programs to help them. Again, the knowledge, the ability is there. It's just that extra and you know, just purposeful education was what was missing. And so we created the preparation programs. They got it, and then they were able to get in and move forward. And so those are the things that I think are the first factors that we have to address. You know, and people know better, they do better. Bottom line.
Yeah, and it's interesting because the entire structure of our education system is made for a particular type of demographic. When it was created, that was what it was for. So a lot of these things that we're not learning in school, it's designed that way because the system that was created, it was made for people who are learning these things at home. Because we don't have that information at home, we miss out on it. So yeah, a redesign of public education would definitely be beneficial.
Yeah, and so that's also happening here at the Culinary School for those listeners who might be interested. Starting this Thursday, followed by two events, one in February, the other in March, is a conversation around 21st century public education. So those are fireside chats it's curated by the Brooklyn NAACP's Education Committee and the Sankofa Global Project. So I'll share that information with you, and maybe those who are interested can come out and join the conversation.
Amazing. Okay, and then I guess wrapping things up, can you tell us something just new that you've accomplished or something new that you guys are working on?
Okay, so new, I feel like everything is new, right? I feel like everything we're doing is new and it's exciting and all that stuff. But right now what we're currently doing is working with or trying to create a mechanism to have local residents connect with all of the resources that are available through the New York City Small Business Services, SBS, right? They have an amazing array of business classes, supports, resources. I mean, it's incredible. Even to down to the point where if a small business owner is looking for a new space, and they'll provide resources to help them identify or negotiate the lease. I mean, they have so many resources. But what also happens is that there's a disconnect. And so those who are in certain communities, for whatever reason, never make it to Manhattan to go to the classes. So what we're trying to do is build a pipeline so that we can offer the classes here locally. So it's a fast track program, and so there'll be one track for those who are just starting up and those who are already in business looking to expand. And so one thing I really want to mention too, just going back to the developer, Erica Keller. I've never seen a developer work within the community the way that she is currently, what she's currently doing. One of the other initiatives that we're working on is every developer knows what it takes to build a building, right? It doesn't change, right? The formula doesn't change. The city and the state, for those of you who may have heard about the Minority and Women-Owned Business Enterprise program, MWBE, right? So the city and state says that 30% of your money should be spent with these entities, right? Most of the time when folks are looking to give contracts, they look around and they really can't find the folks to award, or they're not able to bid on these projects. So what Brisa Builders is doing in collaboration with my organization and another one called Brownsville Think Tank Matters, we're identifying local business owners who are already certified but may not be at the level where they need to be to bid on her project. So we're going to work with them to build that capacity, right? And so what that essentially means is that we're building the pipeline for the businesses that are going to bid on the project to make sure that these contracts will be local, right? And then in turn, those local businesses will hire locally. So again, it's like creating our own pipelines. Developers are not doing that. They'll look around and say, oh, have I seen it? Oh, no, I'm sorry. And then they'll ask for a waiver. We tried. We made it's called a good faith effort.
So there are waivers?
Oh, yes.
Oh, so you can get around, people can get around it.
And you can get a waiver. If you've tried to find an MWBE to award a contract to, and you haven't been able to identify one, you can get a waiver to.
There's a lot of money that we're missing out on.
Oh, absolutely.
And when you say that, is it just developers? Or is it, like, what are the type of businesses?
All government institutions.
So any government institution?
Any government institution is required to spend 30% of their budgets with MWBE.
So what are some examples, just so people have an idea and can start thinking about business ideas that they can start getting
So look at your school system, right? So if you look at the New York City Department of Education, how large is their budget?
$30 billion?
So 30% of that is...
Oh, man, I got to do math. No,
right?
Yeah.
But, as an
about
example.
Like 10
as an example.
billion, yeah.
Right? And so that's an example. HPD, they're another example. There's so many. I mean, I would just, encourage all of the listeners to just go on to the city and New York State, because it's not just city, New York State agencies as well. So there's a lot of opportunities on the table, right? But we just have to make sure that we're building the institutions and the infrastructures to help identify these opportunities and also help people, get access, as well as access to capital, right? That's another big
one.
That's another show.
We're going to have to do some stuff on access to capital, because that's a big one. I think people are generally afraid of getting started because they feel like they don't have the money. But honestly, I was speaking with somebody and they were telling me, like, at the end of the day, if you have a good investment, you'll find investors.
Yes.
So you don't necessarily have to have the money or have to have good credit. It comes down to, do you have the plan, and can you sell that plan to investors?
But also, it's about relationships too. Most of the investors, yes, they invest, but they pretty much invest because, someone that they know told them about this. You know what I mean? Like that. There's some of that too that no one really talks about.
Yeah, that could be even another segment of building relationships and all that. So I guess last but not least, where can people find you? Whether it's social media, websites, how can they reach out and connect with you?
So so there's several. We are Central Brooklyn Economic Development Corporation. We are physically located at 444 Thomas Boylan, between Pitkin and East New York Avenues. We're on the third floor, room 301. And our telephone number is 718-498-4600. 4513. Email address info@cbedc.co. I'll repeat, info@cbedc.co. Our website, same, www.cbedc.co. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter and Instagram. I believe, and so those handles, I think on Twitter, we're at CBEDC_official.
So I think we covered a lot of good things today. I definitely want to thank you for allowing us to come to interview, talk with you, donating your time to us and to the people so we could get this information out.
Oh, no, I appreciate you being here. Thank you so much for this opportunity, to connect with you and your listeners. So,
All right.
We look forward to you coming back.
Yes, definitely. All right.
The format is real sickening, contagious.
Here I come, Daisy. There you go. How we get down.
The format is real sickening, contagious.
Here I come, Daisy.